I wasn't supposed to be here. That's the first thing I thought as I sat alone on a splintered park bench, watching my breath rise like smoke into the freezing night. At 27, I had a six-figure salary, an apartment with exposed brick walls overlooking Central Park, a fiancée who looked like she belonged on a Vogue cover, and a LinkedIn profile so polished it practically glowed. I had made it. Or so I thought. They say your life can change with one phone call. Mine did. We're sorry. Your role has been eliminated. Effective immediately. I sat there blinking, the corporate buzzwords rolling over me like cold water. No warnings. No severance package big enough to matter. I was out. And so the fall began. First went the dinners at overpriced restaurants where the waiters knew my name. Then the rent payments the apartment ID bragged about in every conversation now turned into an overdue notice stapled to my front door. Then the fiancée. She lasted 2 more weeks, though in hindsight, she probably left the second the first crack appeared. I didn't sign up for this, she said as she packed her designer bags into a cab, her heels clicking across the marble floor one last time. I don't blame her. Who wants to watch someone unravel at first? I fought. God, I fought. I flooded the city with my resume, showed up in stiff suits to half-hearted interviews, tried freelancing, tried consulting, tried pretending I was still important. But New York doesn't care who you used to be. It's a machine that runs on relevance. And the minute you slip off the conveyor belt, you're nobody. When my savings hit double digits, I moved into my younger brother's basement out in Queens. Concrete floors. One tiny window that faced a brick wall. The mattress on the ground was harder than the floor itself, and the radiator clanged so loud it sounded like gunshots every night. Still, I told myself it was temporary. A few weeks. Maybe a month. 6 months later, I was sweeping the floors at a grocery store for minimum wage. I met her on a Thursday. Funny how the worst days often disguise the best moments. The store was dead quiet, the kind of slow afternoon where time seems to stretch like chewing gum. I was restocking canned beans when I heard a voice raised at the checkout. I know this coupon is valid. It's not my fault if your system can't scan it properly. I turned my head and saw her. Brown hair tied back in a messy knot, a bright red scarf looped casually around her neck, her hands flying in animated frustration. There was something absurdly charming about how serious she was over $2 off frozen waffles. And before I could stop myself, I laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, more like a reflex, a burst of unexpected life. She spun toward me, hands on hips, mock outrage flashing in her dark eyes. You think this is funny, huh? I shrugged, holding up my hands in surrender. Fighting for truth, justice, and a better breakfast deal, I respect it. She stared at me for a beat. And then, to my amazement, she smiled. A real smile, wide and crinkly at the corners, the kind of smile you don't fake. Her name was Emily. She lived a few blocks away, worked as a freelance graphic designer, loved dogs, hated mornings, and was apparently on a lifelong mission to never overpay for groceries. Over the next few weeks, we bumped into each other more often. Sometimes on purpose. Sometimes not. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into late-night talks. Late-night talks turned into something deeper, something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Of course, I didn't tell her the full story at first. How could I was too ashamed. In my mind, I was still the guy who had failed. The guy sleeping on a mattress in a freezing basement. the guy who didn't have a future worth offering anyone. But Emily. She never asked about job titles or bank accounts. She asked about books. About music. About what made me laugh, what made me angry, what made me me. And somewhere along the way, I started to forget that I was broken. I started to feel human again. The night I finally told her everything, the job loss, the apartment, the fiancé, the crash and burn, I expected her to walk away. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not broken. You're just rebuilding." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I did both. And she just held my hand and stayed. Rebuilding wasn't pretty. It wasn't some magical montage where everything snapped back into place. It was hard. It was slow. It meant scrubbing toilets, fixing furniture for cash, working graveyard shifts, unloading trucks. But for the first time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like laying a new foundation. Brick by brick. Sweat by sweat. Dream by battered dream. Emily was there for all of it. When I got my first small furniture repair contract fixing chairs for a little cafe downtown, she celebrated with a homemade dinner and cheap wine. When I wanted to quit after a client screamed at me for scratching a table, she dragged me out for ice cream and refused to let me give up. Slowly, I saved enough to rent a tiny studio. Nothing fancy. Peeling paint. A window that rattled when the wind blew. But it was mine. Ours. One night, we sat on the roof of that old building, watching the city lights flicker below us. Emily curled against my side, her head on my shoulder. I turned to her and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." She smiled without looking up. "You were never lost," she said softly. "You just needed someone to remind you who you are." Today, I run a small but growing furniture restoration business. I have regular clients, a loyal dog named Murphy who likes to chew on everything I build, and a home filled with mismatched chairs and paint-stained floors. Emily's art hangs on the walls. The same girl who fought for a 2 coupon is now the fiercest champion of my dreams, and every morning, as I sip my coffee and watch the sun rise over this messy, imperfect life we built together, I remind myself, I didn't lose everything at 27. I lost what didn't matter. And I found what I never knew I needed.